פלישות, מנוס ממחשבות, יש פה קרע לא מוסבר, איך לפעמים נשבר, אני בוא, חדשות, לא מעקר, להיות חופשי בארץ, אנחנו שמע ישראל, כולנו Oh, Shema Yisrael, Kolani Am Echad. Welcome. Thank you for your time. We are here together today, Israel Properties and Aaron Krasner. Aaron Krasner is the owner of Anglo Mortgages. I'm Toviyah Stamelman. I'm going to be having a chat with Aaron Krasner. In these crazy times, Aaron, what's been going on, we literally never thought it would happen, but there's a lot going on. And despite all the pain and the suffering and the incredible things that are going on, we need to also move on. And we're starting to get a lot of inquiries, and a lot of people are wanting to come home and come and live in Israel. And we need to get back in the saddle. And so here we are, we're starting a series. And I know that your time is very valuable. So thank you for joining us and welcome. And over to you. We're just going to ask you a little bit, Aaron Krasner. There's his website, Anglo Mortgages. Just if you could just tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, your family, how long you've been in Israel, and where do you live, and why did you choose to live there, Aaron? Welcome.
Thanks, Toviyah. It's really nice to be with you. Really nice to talk to you. As you say, crazy times here in Israel, and you see a lot of sad things, but also a lot of very uplifting things. And exactly as you say, those of us who are not serving, when we're not helping out with the soldiers or to give them the stuff that they need, we've also got to get on with our lives and do our jobs here. Israel needs us to do that too. So absolutely, that's exactly the right spirit that we've got to get in with. So I came to Israel with the intention to stay for 2 years in yeshiva when I was 17 years old. Within about 6 months of being here, I ended up with them. And 23 ago, so I've been here a long time.
Wow.
I got married here when I was at about 21 years old. And as I say, fell in love with the place, made my life here. And I feel very privileged to have the kind of job that is a bridge between the Israeli banking world with their way of doing things and their way of thinking and their way of being, which has its own beauty and its own challenges, and bridging it with the place where I grew up, which is, I grew up in England, and my clients are from all over the world: England, America, South Africa, France, Australia, as you can imagine. And all of those people who not only live abroad, but also live here. And I consider myself very lucky to be able to put those two worlds together in the same way that, I guess by moving here, my life has gone that way too.
Incredible. So you've been here 23 years, eh?
A while, right?
Wow, I mean, it's like a lifetime. So you literally know what's going on, yeah? You know a hell of a lot. You've seen a lot. I mean, 23 years ago, Israel was not the place it is today. I think Netanya first came into power in 1996. So you've been along for the ride, really, eh?
That's right. When I first moved here in 2001, the Mamilla area was just being built. The light rail in Jerusalem was just being built. There was no Waldorf Astoria, and it's very interesting to watch the whole country. How much more you walk around in Jerusalem? How many more high-rise buildings were? When I came in, I don't think there was a single high-rise building. Maybe like the Sheraton Plaza or something.
Wow.
The country's grown. Ramat Bet Shemesh was a few streets. Now it's, I don't know, a few 100,000 people, something like that. Certainly 6 figures, grown about 10 times the size. Amazing. And yeah, and not just that, the Israeli real estate market has changed tremendously. When I got married, we put together a small amount of money and we bought a tiny, tiny place in Jerusalem in Kiryat Yovel.
Wow.
I think we paid maybe $100,000, $130,000. You can't do that anymore.
Incredible.
The
Gee
market,
whiz.
the industry, the market has really, really changed in that respect too. So the country's changed, and certainly the real estate market's changed.
So now you don't live in Jerusalem anymore. You live in Ramat Bet Shemesh, right?
That's right. So before I got married, I lived in Rehavia. I was in yeshiva there in a place called Midrash Shmuel. And so after we got married, we lived there like in Kolel for a few years. I then spent 2 years in Har Nof, which was a very beautiful community.
It's a from community, eh?
Yeah, it's really, really nice, really beautiful. And what I found was, as much as I loved living in Yerushalayim, and I really, really did, the challenge that I found living in Yerushalayim was I was in my late 20s, I had young kids, and we really wanted to be able to find a place that we could afford where we could raise kids in a community, and a lot of the people in Yerushalayim were quite a bit older than us. So we looked at Ramat Bet Shemesh. We enjoyed it. We liked it. We came for a pilot Shabbat. We visited the shuls there, the synagogues, and the schools. And I haven't looked back. It's so beautiful. All the shuls are full. Every kind of type of person that you'd like to be with is there. And I just love them. The kids are doing well, thank God. So I'm very, very pro Ramat Bet Shemesh. But the amazing thing about Israel is there's so many places like that. If Ramat Bet Shemesh isn't for you, but you're an Anglo, maybe Modiin is for you, maybe Ranana is for you, maybe Tel Aviv is for you. Everyone can, maybe up north, maybe down south, everyone can find their place here. And I think that's one of the beautiful aspects of Israel.
Amazing, beautiful. So you're happy, you've never looked back. And tell us a little bit about your business, how you got into it, how long you've been doing it, what's your core focus. Anglo Mortgages, I mean, that's a proper name. I mean, we ourselves, just to give everyone a bit of a color and background, we have been working together with Aaron Krasner for a good few years now. And he's really an absolute mensch. He's an expert provider in what he does. He writes articles. He's very sought after. I know that you're going to be doing a few webinars coming up. You've done a few webinars. You've doing a bit of travels. You're very, very sought after. So we're very happy to have you here. We're very privileged and honored that we work together. And we call you a friend, and we call you one of our top providers. And we've done, thank God, many deals together. And some of them have been really difficult deals. You've really gone beyond the call of duty. You've done personal deals with us, client deals for us. You've structured many, many deals across the board, and we definitely, obviously, we definitely sing your praise and we recommend you. But just tell us a little bit about your business, how you get into it, how long you've been doing it, what you do, what you specialize in.
So, as I mentioned, when I got married, we looked to buy a small home. It wasn't something which we could live in, but at least it was something to get our foot on the property ladder. And I was looking for somebody to help me with the mortgage. And like with so many things in life, and especially in this tekufa, in this period, it was an absolute nightmare. I hired somebody who didn't explain to me the process, didn't tell me when things needed to be done by, and things got so bad, like I was under pressure to get the mortgage done. Like my father had to fly out from England, which he was not happy to do, and bail me out because we'd just gone into a big mess. So it was really it wasn't fun, but thank God we got through it, obviously. It wasn't too bad. But it opened my eyes to the fact that, you know what, I actually don't know anybody. And I'm asking around my friends, I couldn't find anybody who was able to, like I say, bridge the gap, who can speak to me in English and get me through this process. So I made a note of that. And a year or two later, I was getting a little bit older, 24, 25, was finishing in Kola, and it was time to go to work. And I called up Nefesh B'Nefesh, and I said to them, I'm thinking about becoming a mortgage broker for the Anglo community. Can you possibly recommend anybody who is a mortgage broker who could just tell me about the process? How do you qualify? How do you get involved in the industry? So they gave me the name of somebody. I called him up. I said, would you mind if I meet with you so you can explain to me, what's involved? So I sat with the guy, with a lovely man, lovely guy, and we spoke for 40 minutes. I asked a whole load of questions. I was 24 years old, no work experience. And my last question was, okay, sounds good. Can I come work for you? And he said, okay.
Amazing.
So fast forward 16 years later, and I worked with that particular man who was amazing to me for 13, 14 years. We got on great together. I built up a book of business. He did well, I did well, thank God. And about 3 years ago, I thought it was time, I'm getting on a bit. It's time to open my own company. So that's how Anglo Mortgages was born. And I particularly like the name because I think that's exactly the niche that I'm looking for. There's a million brokers out here, but I focus on the concept of Anglo. They've got the Anglo people, English speakers, whether you live here, whether you live abroad, they've got a certain mindset. And that's what we're here to, that's what I'm here to service.
Incredible, unbelievable. So your speciality is dealing with Anglos, and I see, I mean, obviously we can have a look at your website. You've got some amazing client references and referrals and frequently asked questions. You write a blog. But in terms of like your speciality, like for example, the process, what's required? I want to buy property. I want to get a mortgage. Can I get one if I'm not in Israel? Like, for example, I see a property. Would you think I should first come to you, get pre-qualified, find out how much? What's involved? Like a typical process. I want to buy property now. Let's assume I'm not living in Israel. I'm living in South Africa. I want to buy property for 3 million shekels. Typically just take us through the process. What happens? What do you need from me? How long does it take?
Got it. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. So the first thing I would tell somebody who has those types of questions is pick up the phone, speak to a mortgage broker, and get the beginning pieces of information that allow you to start zeroing in on your price range, on the neighborhood, on the process, what's affordable to you, what can I get you approved for a mortgage, etc. So the very first thing I would say is always with that, pick up the phone. When somebody does pick up the phone and they call me, so we have a conversation, I get a sense of how much down payment they have, which can sometimes take some time to work out. I get a sense of how much mortgage I can get them approved for, which is obviously a function of, number one, their income, and number two, their residency. If you live in Israel, you can get a 75% mortgage if it's your first property. If you don't live in Israel, the system is designed to limit you to 50%. My job is usually to try to, even though you're limited to 50%, find a way to squeeze out an extra 10, 20, 25% on top of that. But basically your starting point is a bit lower. So we try to work out, okay, so now we know how much down payment you've got. We know how much mortgage we can get you approved for. We know how much mortgage you can afford. And that usually enables people to start calling somebody like yourself, working out what type of neighborhood they want to buy in, what type of house they can afford, et cetera, et cetera. And then we start actually making it happen. So that means getting together income documents. I need, like, let's say 2 years of tax returns and bank statements. It's a list of things, not too complicated. I get it together with the client, take it to various banks, hammer out the best possible deal, and come back to the client and say, look, we've got you pre-approved for a loan. So now you're ready to go back to Trevor. You've got your pre-approval in your hand, and he'll help you find, he'll help you get to the next stage of agreeing a price, signing a contract. And inside the contract is a payment schedule where you need to know how much money I need to come up with, when I need to come up with it. And I'm there, and so are you, Toviyah, throughout, until the client gets the keys and beyond, to make sure that he's looked after, that we're seeing round corners. There's the kinds of issues that we've seen because we've gone through this process hundreds of times before, but the client might not have seen. And as a team, work together to get the client from A, which is the basic starting point from the first time they pick up the phone, to Z or Z, depending on where you're coming from, which is a couple of months after they've gotten their keys and settled down in their new dream home in Israel.
So, for example, if I want to do like a mortgage application today, typically how long will it take you to give me an answer?
Right. Okay. So you've got to break that down, I would say, into 3 milestones. The first milestone is an answer. And by an answer, an indication of what I can get you, that's a phone call that I can tell you on the spot after talking for a few minutes. Getting pre-approved can take, from the day I get all the documents, anywhere from a day to a week, usually. If it's a very large deal, it can sometimes take a bit longer. So very large deals need to be approved at higher levels in the bank, but usually from a day to a week. That's I guess, a concrete answer in terms of a pre-approval. Then you've got to think how long it takes you to get to contract, and then you've got to think how long it takes you to get your keys. Those are different milestones along the process, but I think the first milestone is a day to a week to get you approved.
Okay, so and it's also very different when you're buying an existing property, a Yachniya, and a project, correct? So,
Exactly.
for example, like let's say I want to buy a project, and the project is like the project wants a certain amount of money, and I'm only going to get the keys in 3 years' time. How does that work? Starting to pay the mortgage, don't have a tenant in place. What's involved there? How can you help with that type of thing?
Exactly. So in certain respects, a second-hand purchase is much more simple because as a process. It's a simpler process because you're buying from a private individual, and within 2-3 months, you're done with them and you never speak to them again. So it's quicker. When you're buying firsthand, obviously, the apartment doesn't exist yet. So you're entering into a much longer relationship with the contractor. And that often means staged payments, where you're making your first payment when you sign your contracts and your final payment when you get keys. It could be a 2-year process, can be a 3-year process plus if there are delays. As regards to the mortgage, so that depends on the circumstances. Theoretically, you might not need me for another 3 years. So I've made my down payment now. I don't need the mortgage funds until I get my keys. And I don't want to borrow anything until then. So something like that, I say, fine, call me 3-4 months before you need your keys and we'll talk. And I'm not involved in the process until very late on. Generally speaking, though, I recommend, with good reason, not doing it that way. I like not just getting a first-hand buyer to get pre-approval before they sign the purchase contract. I like them to try to draw down some of the funds, 10%, 15%, ASAP. And the reason why I do that is that if you don't borrow any of the mortgage facility that I've gotten you approved for within 2-3 months of getting approved, if you come back to the bank 2-3 years later and say, okay, you approved me in 2023, now it's 2026, can I have the money? Well, the bank says, well, there's a lot of time has passed since then. Is your income where it was? Are our lending terms where they were? Are interest rates where they were? The whole situation can change. I've had situations where clients thought they could get 75% financing when they signed the contract, and they waited years and years. And by the time it came time to get the mortgage, the rules of the game had changed and they have no recourse. But if you get approved for, let's say, a 2 million shekel mortgage, and you draw down 200 or 300,000 straight away, so even though you haven't borrowed the entire loan facility, the bank considers your file to be a file that's already like on the done pile. It's partially released. So they're kind of on the hook to make sure that you actually get that 2 million shekel when you need it. So it takes away, my inclination is to try to remove risk for clients. And so I like the idea of having taken some mortgage funds, so you're making some small monthly repayment at the beginning, but at least you know you've locked in the financing. Without the financing, you can't do the deal. You can't be in a situation where you've signed on a contract for a 4 million shekel property and you've only got 2 million shekel to pay the contractor. You have to know you've got bank financing lined up if you're relying on it. So that's the differences between first-hand and second-hand properties, and that's my approach to de-risking when you're buying firsthand.
So that's true. Okay, so you take away that risk, but now you've got a situation where you've got a client who's getting this property in 2-3 years, and they're starting to pay a mortgage. So, for example, on a 3 million shekel mortgage property, assuming you're not an Israeli citizen, you can get a 1.5 million shekel mortgage. Now you're paying 10% of it. What's that? How much would that cost you a month?
Well, let's say in your example, 1.5 million shekel. So that's a repayment on a 30-year basis of approximately 8,000 shekel a month. Now, 8,000 shekel a month for most people is a lot of money. Okay? But if you're talking about borrowing 10% of that, you're talking about 800 shekel a month. 800 shekel a month in the context of a 1.5 million shekel loan on a 3 million shekel property for a 2-year period is already the kinds of amounts that most people don't love, but can tolerate. Add to that the fact that on Israeli mortgages, let's say you're talking about a 30-year loan, it's very normal for the first 2 years, especially with first-hand purchases, it's very normal for the first 2 years, 3 years to have an introductory interest-only period. So on a normal mortgage, you pay about, on the first month, you pay about 60% interest and 40% capital. And slowly but surely, as the loan matures, the proportion that goes to capital increases. So if I take that 800 shekel and I get it on an interest-only basis, so I'm only paying 60% of 800 shekel. What's that? 520, let's say, something like that. So we're talking about a monthly repayment of 8,000 shekel a month, which is what you're thinking you're going to be taking on. And you get that down to 520 shekel a month, and you've locked in the full facility.
It's amazing.
For most people, that's the way to, for most people, it's worth it. You know, you pay a lot of money for insurance.
Yeah.
For all of the insurances that you pay. So 520 shekel a month on interest to make sure you know you've got the loan locked in.
That's incredible.
I think it's worth it.
So, like, that leads me to the next question. What type of mortgages do you get in Israel? How do they compare to South Africa, the UK, England? Some of it, it's a different structure here, correct?
Correct. So the first big difference that you need to think about when you're an Anglo is that you probably are going to have in the deal here 2 currencies that you're thinking about, right? You're buying a property in shekels, and your income, not always, because a lot of my clients live in Israel and earn in shekels, but can often be the case that your down payment and your income is in a foreign currency. If you are, some people, let's say if you're an American, you live in America, you earn dollars, your whole life is in dollars, you think in dollars, you're buying a property, you're not planning to rent it out. So you could consider it worthwhile to take a loan in dollars. Now, if you live in America, that's a very normal thing to do, but everyone borrows everything in dollars. Here in Israel, the vast majority of loans are shekels, don't get me wrong, but it's a very normal thing, especially for foreign residents, to get them a loan in dollars, in euros, in sterling. Unfortunately, not rand. that we can't do. And Australian dollars is difficult, but it's possible. But major foreign currencies loans are possible. So that's already just the very first thing to think about. That you may decide that you're taking a loan in a currency that isn't your natural basic currency. The other issue is that if you're borrowing in shekels, there's Bank of Israel regulations that say that in order to keep the whole banking system stable, the Bank of Israel set a law that 1/3 of your mortgage has to be set at a fully fixed rate. Now, this used to be quite annoying because for the last 15 years or even longer, variable rates were much lower than fixed rates. So the Bank of Israel was mandating that you take a mortgage at a higher rate than a variable rate is. That's flipped on its head now. The 1/3 of the loan that you have to take in a fully fixed rate is cheaper. Fixed rates today are in the ballpark range of 5%, which, by the way, is quite a bit lower than it is in most other countries. But for the people who are listening, it's cheaper than the UK, cheaper than the US. I'm sure it's cheaper in South Africa, but I'm not sure. And so that you have to do. Now, the remaining 2/3 can be however you want. So there's already another difference that You're taking the loan into different tracks. You might have a 1.5 million shekel mortgage. 500,000 of it might be fully fixed, and the remaining million might be a variable rate of interest. They also have something here in Israel called semi-fixed, mishtana kol chamesh, or something like that, where you have an interest rate which is fixed for set intervals. In other words, it resets a 30-year loan on a 30-year repayment, but the interest rate resets every 5 years. And every 5 years, you can get out without prepayment penalty. So that's another very interesting product, especially in the last couple of years when the variable rates have gone so much higher. The variable rates today are something like 6.25%, give or take. Having a semi-fixed loan, which is, again, around about 5%, you're locked in for only 5 years, you've got some flexibility, let's see what happens, is actually quite an attractive product now. A lot of my clients are deciding to take semi-fixed loans, which never used to be the case until a couple of years ago.
Amazing. It's incredible. So if you can give us an idea of a very complicated deal that you've done recently and how you managed to fix it for the client. Are they usually process smooth, difficult? But give us a very, very tough deal that you've done recently and then how you sorted it out for the client.
Oof. Okay, that's a good one. Look, I'll give you a couple of categories of difficult. And it's very funny because you have difficult files in the very low income department, and you have difficult files in the extremely high income department. Like it can sometimes be easier for the avrech to get approved for the mortgage that he needs for the 500,000 shekel, million shekel that he needs to buy a small apartment in, I don't know, Kiryat Sefer, than it can be for the multi-millionaire to get approved for the luxury apartment in Rothschilds. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So challenges on the low end, avrechim, kollel guys. So often they live on stipends, help from parents. They can't provide a tax return or a pay stub. They have milgot. They live on a stipend from the kollel, and the wife works a little bit, and sometimes the wife's on maternity leave. So putting all of those income sources together, 3,000 shekel here and a 2,500 shekel here, and maybe a 5,000 shekel there, and putting all that together to get those over the line is its own challenge.
Wow,
and
amazing,
it's actually quite a beautiful thing that all the Israeli banks, from the most secular banker, and a lot of my friends in the bank are secular. They fully understand that there's a group of people here, the avrechim, the kollel people. Generally speaking, the loans that they take, they do repay. They've got a strong record at the bank. Often you have like these pictures up in the manager's office of like the heteriska. You have like the bankers who have sat down with big rabbis in order to make the avrechim able to borrow according to the halacha. And that's its own challenge, and that's an interesting one. And on the opposite end, from the very wealthy, you often have people whose income is all held in companies. Very wealthy people very often hold their money in companies. The company earns money, and the reason why they do that is to have as low tax bill as possible. We all want to pay as little tax as possible within the law, of course. So often, people who are earning tremendous sums of money, but if you look at their tax return, it doesn't show very much because they don't have to pull out a lot of money to live. And especially real estate people in America, because of depreciations, the wealthy people have like, I earned minus $1 million this year because they have write-offs. So getting those kinds of files over the line can sometimes also be quite challenging, because if you think very much inside the box, the guy doesn't have income, which is of course absurd. So getting those files over the line is also difficult. But I think some of the maybe more sort of colorful stories, a lot of it came out during Corona, was how do you get, like, I had a client who had to get money paid out. Every file that I do has a deadline. You've just got to get the deal done by this date. Otherwise, the client's potentially in breach of contract. So, usually we're fine, but every file has this risk that, there's a very hard deadline. You have to get the job done by a certain time. And everybody has to take that date extremely seriously.
Sure.
And sometimes we in Corona, we had a couple of occasions where we got quite close to the deadline because, let's say, the appraiser couldn't get into the apartment because people were in quarantine. So now we're held up for that. And then we're sending documents over to the seller, and the seller can't sign the documents because he's in quarantine. And then the documents come back to the buyer, and I need to get the buyer now to sign on the loan file, and he can't come into the file because he's in quarantine. And then we try and get him into the bank, but then the bank is in quarantine. And these things cascade. So we had to be, a lot of the times we had to be quite creative about how to find a way to keep social distancing to the best of our ability, and also get appraisers into properties, and also get, sometimes what we had to do is I had to get lawyers to witness signatures from across the room. I'd bring the documents to the client, I'd get them in to sign it, we'd open a window, we'd have the notary witnessing the signature, we'd do our social distancing.
Amazing.
and get files done that way. So you never know, every file, when you start it, you never know what the problem, sometimes it's plain sailing, you never know what it's going to be that can hold you up. But thank God I've got a lot of experience. And if you come with a can-do attitude that whatever it is, whatever you're going to throw at me, we'll find a way through it, then thank God you get the job done. No, thank God so far, 16 years, we've never not delivered.
Baruch Hashem, incredible. So that's another thing now that you're talking about COVID. And my next question I wanted to ask you, your understanding of the market currently with the situation, in obviously with the war and everything that's going on. I mean, the beginning was very, very quiet, like with Corona, things went dead. Now we're starting to get a lot of inquiries, especially now that the rate, not the rate, that the dollar is stronger, that the shekel's weaker. So just your view and where you think what's happening, where do you think the market's going to go? Do you think we're going to see a lot more people? Would you advise people now who are on the fence wanting to buy to look at buying? Where do you see the rates going in the next 12 months? What's your overall view of the whole market? What's really tachlis going on in the market now with the situation, with the dollar, with the shekel, the rate?
Got it. Good question. So I'll say a few things. I think from October 7th, again, we'd all just been in Chagim, in Israel for about a month, for about 6 weeks. All important things happen acharei Chagim. We got to get something done. You know what? We'll push it off till after Rosh Hashanah. We'll push it off till after Sukkot, and we'll deal with it. So everybody was expecting to wake up on October 8th and do all the things that they'd pushed off until acharei Chagim. Didn't work out that way. Yeah. And I would say for about 2-3 weeks, I don't know what I live in Israel. I don't know what it's like in Chutz La'aretz, but I imagine it was very similar. For the first 2, maybe 3 weeks, I think everybody was just in a daze. The banks, like a lot of the men were off in Miluim, were off to reserve duty. A lot of the women had kids home. And if you didn't have kids home, you had kids in the army or both. So there was a few weeks where I don't think nobody was thinking. I feel like, and from the point of view of the phone ringing, same. I would have expected on October 8th to have received a lot of phone calls, and I think nothing. I think everybody was shocked, and we all know why. Last couple of days, I think I've had maybe 3 or 4 calls a day. I usually get about 1 a day, something like that, 3 or 4 calls. And I think there's a bit of a common theme. I think it's from people from abroad who have noticed 2 things. One thing is that they've been watching the news. And however crazy it is here in Israel, a lot of them all said the same thing, that guys in Israel, you have rocket fire, you have all the crazy stuff that you have the IDF. And a lot of people in Chutz La'aretz, even if they weren't necessarily making Aliyah in the next year or 2, a lot of them are saying, you know what, I think now's the time, if I can, to make something happen in Israel. So I think that trend, I don't know how long it will take. I think it started, I personally feel it in my business just for the last few days. I've seen that. I spoke to lots of people like that just in the last literally couple of days. I was expecting that. I wasn't expecting it necessarily so soon, but I do think that while the demand has dropped in the last couple of weeks, I don't feel that that's because demand in aggregate and overall has dropped. I feel like demand is being deferred. And I feel that there will be a point where a lot of people who have pushed off plans for a month, for 2 months, for 3 months, there's going to come a point where everybody feels, okay, it's time to go back into the market. And then I think we may see a price jump as a result of that, particularly in the Anglo neighborhoods. We all know there's only a certain number of places where Anglo people like to live. They're big, they're diverse, but they're limited.
Yeah.
And I think that will have a knock-on effect on prices. And I think particularly those people who are waking up to the fact that the dollar has gone up from 3.4 to, I don't know, 4 last time I checked, maybe a little lower now. That means real estate prices for them has dropped 15%. And I think it's true of the pound, and I think it's true of the euro too. So I think people who have the ability to buy here are waking up to see a certain favorable circumstance that may come out from all this craziness. I always tell people, I've always said this, I think when it comes to buying a home in Israel, virtually everybody, I speak to a lot of people, virtually all of them, they don't buy their house in Israel because they've looked at every single possible investment opportunity that there is in the world, and they've come to the conclusion that of all the places in the world that they could possibly buy, or all the things they could possibly invest in, they're doing it. A good chunk of this, and I'm not saying the numbers work, the numbers are good, it's been a very solid investment in Israeli real estate for the last 20 years, and I think it's going to only get stronger. But I think people do it because they just want a home in Israel. They feel connected to the country, they love the country, they like visiting the country, they may have children who will come here one day. And I think that at whatever stage in the process they are, whether making Aliyah in a year or in 10 years or in 20 years, they do it because they love Israel. And I feel that if that's a good part of your reason, or if it's because you want a home in there, you want to build a family there, I advise people, don't try to time the market. Maybe prices will go down 5%, maybe prices will go up 5%. But if you've got the opportunity to make something that you really want to make happen, make it happen. Don't wait until circumstances change that the thing that you really wanted to do, you can no longer do.
Yeah.
So I think interest rates are maybe a little higher than they were 2 years ago. They're still, broadly speaking, okay. 5%, 5.25%, maybe even 4.75%. Not so bad. Even if prices drop 10%, it's not so bad. I just think that the really bad thing that you really want to avoid is having the opportunity to do something that you really wanted to do and could have done and didn't do, and then the market moves on and you can no longer do it. I think that's the thing that you really want to avoid.
Amazing. So I think I do agree with you. I mean, we also, like, for the first couple of weeks, everyone was just in a bit of a daze. We really have seen a lot of more inquiries now, people coming back into the market. We're having more meetings. We're getting more properties to sell. We're meeting with more buyers. And I do think that there's an opportunity, and I do think that, please God, we'll hear very good news. And I agree with you that people need to make a move, and they need to take the opportunity. So, just in terms of let's just quickly discuss. I mean, I'm sure everyone's wants to ask you the question: why must they? First of all, can they get a mortgage in their own country if they want to buy in Israel? They can.
Oh, you want me to? So, in terms of that question, you can. But in order to do so, you need to borrow. You cannot take let's say just talk about an American for the sake of argument. An American person cannot go to an American bank and get security against an Israeli asset. What you can do is you can mortgage your home in America. But if you're usually it's tidier when you are making a real estate investment to secure the borrowing against the asset that you are buying. And you're buying a property in Israel, you'll take a mortgage in Israel, you'll have a bank account in Israel, you have a rental income in Israel, and everything is self-contained. People don't generally like to mix and match.
Yeah.
And particularly when the interest rates are not better. I don't think that, the interest rates have never been substantially lower in America than they've been here than in Israel. I don't think over the last 15 years, maybe 1%, 1.5%. And right now, Israeli mortgages are cheaper. So it is I can understand from the point of view of familiarity. You go to your bank in America or your bank in South Africa, it's familiar. But from the point of view of objective business decisions, I don't see a reason. Take a mortgage here in Israel, or both.
So that's the next question. Like, why would I come to Aaron Krasner Anglo Mortgages, not just going to Bank Leumi or Bank Mizrahi and speak to them? What am I going to pay you, and what are you going to give me for the service?
Got it. So I would answer that in two ways. One way is that even if, let's say you went to Bank Mizrahi, and I'm not picking on Bank Mizrahi, I love Bank Mizrahi. Let's say you go to Bank Mizrahi and you ask them, what can you do for me? And they'll tell you, the best possible thing that I can do for you is X. They're not lying. They're right. The best possible thing they can do for you is X. But they only know one bank. They can give you the best option that Bank Mizrahi can give you, but they can't offer you what Bank Leumi can do, what Bank Yerushalayim can do, what Bank Hapoalim can do. They haven't got an overview of the market in terms of all the various options to say that there might be better options out there. That's point one, and it happens a lot. It happens more than you think. Secondly, Bank Mizrahi work for Bank Mizrahi. And when they offer you an interest rate, they price it at a price that's good for them. And they haven't got somebody like me who is bashing them on the head to say, I'm very sorry, if you want to take this lovely client, this wonderful client, you're going to need to offer it at the best possible price. And I know what the best possible price is, and this is how you need it done. I would say a third reason is when you take a real estate agent, when you take a lawyer, you're not just there to get them to get you the property at the price, sign the contract, goodbye. You need somebody there who will fight your corner till the end. You don't know what's going to go wrong. You don't know what you're going to need. And if you go and approach somebody directly at Bank Mizrahi, you're one other person who's sending an email, who's trying to get hold of them on the phone or whatever it may be. But you don't have somebody whose entire job is advocating for the client under any circumstances to get through any problem until the job is done. And one final point, I could go on this. This is an answer I could give for an hour, but you don't need to. One final point I would say is what I mentioned earlier. There's something called seeing round corners. If you go through the process enough times, you know what clients are not necessarily told, or where you see where clients could be blindsided. I take it as my job to make sure that you never get blindsided. I try to give you all the information I can in a systematic and correct and clear way, so you don't get surprised. And that doesn't happen. That can easily, going directly to the bank, it doesn't work that way. Anyway, those are 4 reasons off the top of my head.
Amazing. So, and for your fees, if you're living in Israel, you're living abroad, what sort of fees do you charge and how they're paid?
Okay. So, generally speaking, I charge 1% of the loan amount plus VAT. So if you're taking a 2 million shekel loan, I charge 20,000 shekel plus VAT. VAT is 17%. If I can save you, I don't know, let's say 0.25% a year on the interest, so that alone pays for itself in 4 years. On top of that, you've got the service of me taking care of every aspect of the thing. On top of that, you've got the advisory component of how to structure the loan in the way that works best for you. And yeah.
Okay. So your final message, obviously the best way to get hold of you, do you prefer a phone call, email, WhatsApp, or all of the above, your website?
Okay. So in terms of how to get hold of me, my cell phone number, I guess we could put it in the notes to this video, but it's my cell phone number is 0546 822 174. My website is
WhatsApp.
That's WhatsApp and
just say it again, sorry.
0546 822-174.
Okay.
My website is anglomortgages.com. You can go to the contact us button and I'll send me a message. I'll get back to you, or somebody else in the company will get back to you. And any of the other normal ways, you can email me, etc. My email address is on my website, aaron@anglomortgages.com. In terms of a final message, I think what I said earlier is the message I really want to get out, which is, it's November 8th today. It's a month since October 7th. It's been a tough time for the Jewish people. But from that tough time, we've seen tremendous unity, tremendous bravery, everybody volunteering, everybody pitching in. And Israel is strong. And Israel is strong, and Israel will be strong. And that comes not just from the army, but the families behind the army, and the businesses which are behind the families, and the real estate industry which is behind those families. And we're strong in every way. And if you're thinking about joining into this project with a purchase in Israel, it's not just a vote of confidence in the country, but it's a vote of confidence in all of Israel. And you should do it.
Beautiful. Aaron, thank you so much. Aaron Krasner, Anglo Mortgages. We're so happy that you gave us your time. It's been incredible. And please God, we'll see you soon. We'll hear lots of good things. And I'm going to just play a little bit of another bit, just end off with a bit more of that song for everybody. And we'll please God post this all over. And I should have thanked you so much.
Wonderful, Toviyah. It's always good to see you. You should have a lot of hatzlacha, and everybody should be blessed.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. God bless. And please God, just success and brocha, and we'll speak to you soon.
Sounds good. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Beautiful. Thanks, Aaron.
Take care.
Speak soon. God bless.